You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading. Guess I got bored.
Hello and welcome to TFM's Books and Comic Show, and we have a big show for you this week, and I'm so excited to have with me two phenomenal gentlemen to be able to talk about some great news and a good Star Trek book. Bruce Gibson, man, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I don't know. It's kind of warm in here. I don't know if it is where you are, but it's a little warm. Maybe I'm just excited about talking about this stuff.
I mean, it could be the fact that we're both, sharing the screen right now with none other than Casey Pettitt, and I don't know, is it hot in here?
I have that effect on Zoom calls, so
you bring the heat on.
Oh my goodness! Well, we're gonna bring the heat because we got some great news to talk about before we dive into our feature, as we're going to be talking about The Last Roundup by Christy Golden. Before we get there, though, want to say huge thank you to everybody who's listening. Really appreciate it. Of course, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, now you can rate podcasts on Spotify. Give us some stars, people, if you're listening over there. Same thing with Apple Podcasts. You can also give us a review on Apple Podcasts as well, and help people find the show. And of course, you could find us on Twitter at TrekFM. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. We got the listeners only discussion group you can join and talk to listeners from all over the world. Trek.fm, where you can see all of the shows we've got going on. We've got a Warp 5 and the Orb back, and we're really moving with those shows again too. So much happening here. And of course, if you want to make sure that all of the shows keep coming to you each and every week, you can go over to patreon.com/TrekFM and become part of our team, like the one and only Casey Pettitt, as well as Greg Rosier, who are associate producers of Literary Treks, to make sure that this show keeps coming to you and the network. And as we hit 2022, just hitting the ground running, we could definitely use your help. So go over to patreon.com/TrekFM. Well, it is no lie, guys. We got some serious news up in this place, and none other than the fact that we're going to be getting an audio drama set in the Picard universe here with none other than Michelle Hurd and Jerry Ryan returning with their voice talents, as well as a full audio drama. So first, I got to ask you guys, when you heard this news, were you excited?
It's about time. I've never heard any of the other, I know there's other audio dramas with other series, but and people have been hankering for this, but man, this is something I think that's been a long time coming. Simon & Schuster's finally got on the ball with doing audiobooks for all the new novel releases. And so now to get an original audio drama like this that is co-written by Kirsten Beyer, who is one of the co-creators of Star Trek Picard. I mean, what more can you ask for? And, we're going to have to listen to it before season 2 starts, I think a week or two later after this audio drama comes out. So super excited for sure.
Oh, absolutely. This is something I've been asking for a number of years because, it just opens up so many possibilities. And so when you have a new series like this going on, you can fill in little blanks that you're not going to get in the show, just like the novels and the comics do. But now you can do it in an audio format using the actors from the show. But the potential of opening this up to past series, you could do something Star Trek Enterprise with some of those actors, or Deep Space Nine, Voyager, on and on and on. And I hope this really takes off because I'd like to see them even venture into those older series. But if they just stay with the new ones, that's a plus too.
Yeah, I 100% agree with both of you. I think this is phenomenal. And, you know, you guys know, having KMFB back, I mean, it's fantastic. You know, I love Kirsten. So excited. You know, Mike Johnson, so good at so many of our Star Trek comics that we've read. And I mean, I couldn't be more excited, about this. I had to reach out to Kirsten the moment I heard it and just be like, yes, because this is really exciting. And this is really fun. Like you said, Bruce, filling in those little gaps. Like this is going to be something that's going to help with that relationship we saw with 7 and 9 and Raffi at the very end of Picard. And kind of give them an adventure all on their own right after season 1's conclusion and before we get into season 2. So, I mean, this is the perfect way to get fans excited about season 2 of Picard, which I know we're all hoping is going to be good. So, I do have to ask you guys a question because we got to rate and judge, I guess, an audiobook by its cover. And so what do you guys think of this one?
I like it. I mean, because we have the two principal actresses on the cover, and I'm trying to figure out what that symbol really is all about in the middle.
Is that the Fenris Ranger symbol?
That's
maybe
kind of what I was thinking.
Right. It might. I think so, because that is part of what the book is. You know. So, I mean, the last time I looked at an audiobook cover for Star Trek, it had Captain Sulu on it. So this is throwing me off quite a bit.
You know, I think it's fine. I think it's decently arty. You know, I mean, they've given a kind of more artistic rendition of their faces, which, you know, it's easy to do in Photoshop. But, I mean, I wouldn't say it's overly exciting. I think the biggest thing here is they want to promote the two main actresses that are back with their voice talents. And you know, I mean, that makes complete sense.
Does it look like there's something behind them? It looks like there's like almost like a face behind them, very faint, but it wouldn't make sense because you can't really see any of it. Almost looks like there's an eyebrow above Jerry Ryan's head. I don't know. I feel like there's more questions than there are answers, but it's a decent looking cover. You know,
maybe it's Kirsten Beyer.
There you go.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
The new great bird of the galaxy.
Well, so we don't just have one book cover to judge. We also have Picard's second Self novel that's coming out by Una McCormick, and they've released that cover as well. And Bruce, before we get to that cover, can you give us the blurb for that too?
Following the explosive events seen in season 1 of Star Trek Picard, Raffi Mussaker finds herself torn between returning to her old life as a Starfleet intelligence officer or something a little more tame, teaching at the academy perhaps. The decision is made for her through a message from an old contact, a Romulan spy, is received asking for immediate aid. With the help of Elnor and assistance from Jean-Luc Picard, Raffi decides to take on this critical mission and quickly learns that past sins never stay buried. Finding the truth will be complicated and deadly.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum. So first I got to ask you before we talk about the cover, like, she's busy after the first season. I mean, if she's going on vacation with 7 of 9 and now this, it's like, how long is the time period between season 1 and season 2?
That's a good question, right?
And will either of these stories reference each other? That I'll be curious if this one, especially since it's coming out a few months after the audio drama, if any of her other exploits with 7, or the Fenris Rangers will be referenced at all. I'm assuming Una McCormick knew about that audio drama before anyone else. So that's exciting. I mean, and the cover itself is, another kind of just promotional pictures, kind of arted up, but there is kind of an interesting looking wormhole or something in the middle of it. It's very in line with the newer covers lately. It seems like with the main characters kind of front and center on this, although I guess the wormhole kind of thing is really the center, but just kind of giving everyone their FaceTime on these books.
Well, yeah, and that thing in the back, which I think is a cosmic toilet flush, is what it looks like to me.
Yes.
It's blue, and that's my favorite color. So anytime blue's the prominent color on a novel, I just love
It's like that cleaning solution that you put in your toilet to
tidy bowl.
I think both of you said it so well. Really both of these covers are so similar in the sense that it is just basically artistic versions of promotional covers. I mean, it's not exciting. I would say this, unlike the cover for the book we're going to discuss in the Last Roundup, which is a beautiful piece of art with the classic TOS characters, these just anybody who's decently good at Photoshop could put these together. And so, when it comes to selling a book, I mean, the reason you put their faces on there is you want people to be like, oh, Picard's face sells books. We know that. And, you put, Jerry Ryan's face or Michelle Hurd's face on there as well with the other, people are going to gravitate towards that. But otherwise, I mean, as a fan, it's kind of the same thing that I feel like with movie poster art. Like, I get really tired of promotional picture, photoshopped posters. I miss, Drew Struzan type art type of thing, or, the cool book covers we used to get with, Kevin, I think it's Kevin Birdsong.
I think it was
Keith Birdsong. There you go. Yeah. His artwork was phenomenal. That kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's fine. It is what it is, but I wouldn't say that this would get like my stamp of approval of like, oh, I'm so excited because I saw that cover.
Yeah, it's more just exciting that there's a book at all.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, well, we have a quick, I just wanted to touch base with you guys because we got Mirror War, we got the Mirror War data issue and then issue 3. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm still kind of stuck in a rut with this series as to I don't really know where it's going. And I find myself a little bit frustrated in reading the series because I'm not really picking up on anything that gets me excited to continue to read it. Am I way off base, or I don't know? What do you guys think?
No, I actually wrote in my notes, I'm so confused, like especially in issue number 3, because we got these 2 issues. The data one actually, I feel like the data one by itself was okay. It was a good story, and I actually feel like it would have been better like in the Prime universe or whatever we're calling the literary universe, the comic universe, the non-mirror universe. I think that would have been a fun adventure for Data and Barclay non-mirrored, just because it would have added something a little bit to Barclay's character. But as far as these Mirror War stories go, once I got into reading issue number 3, I have no idea where that Data story fits in because it's not referenced at all. It's, and in fact, actually in issue number 3, Barclay and Data are still at odds with each other, yet they seem like they become friends in the Data one. So I don't know. It's, they're there, like it's kind of ready for these ones to kind of either find their story or conclude and let's move on to something else.
Yeah, I mean, I failed at doing my homework because I haven't read these 2 yet, but I'm looking through them as we're talking. And of course, I can't make any judgment calls just by looking through them. But I will say at the end of issue 3, it kind of piques my interest of where it's going without reading the story, but seeing what other characters are going to be involved. So that gets me excited. But the thing that really hits me, and I hate picking on this, but after reading Coda book 3 and going to the Mirror Universe, I like that representation of the Mirror Universe better than this version, because this is just a bunch of angry TNG people.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because this almost feels like a prequel to what we see in the Deep Space Nine series, because this almost seems to be explaining how Smiley ends up, maybe on a completely different side, possibly, because he's left behind. Well, he's not left behind. Brahms makes sure he's left behind.
He's left for dead, really.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure how all this really plays out. And I think that's one of the things is this has felt so nebulous in its time frame for the Mirror Universe. I don't know how this fits in with not literary canon stuff, but I don't know how this really fits in with the Star Trek canon of what's been on screen and where this is supposed to be. And I think that's one of the things that's really been throwing me off. And seeing that in this, I guess in the third issue, made me think, okay, maybe that's what they're doing. And I guess that would make sense because we never saw TNG. And so this would be taking place before what we saw in Deep Space Nine, but I don't know. So I can't say the series has me super excited to continue with, these issues because I'm like you too, Casey. I'm just kind of confused. I'm so confused, man. Maybe I should just, I don't know.
What's
drink more beer.
confusing? Is it the direction of the story or is the story itself confusing?
I feel like it's the direction kind of. I mean, they've got this underlying story of going, and I can't remember the name of the race, but the shipbuilder race, it starts with an F. I can't remember, but they're trying to get to this shipyard basically, but now we're 3 issues in plus a 0 issue and now a Data one shot, and we're no further along really in this than anything else. Like this one was them sabotaging a Cardassian listening post so that they could continue on their way. Like it did nothing for the story if the story is getting to the shipyard.
I think you nailed it in the sense that the story needs to move forward like crazy, in the sense like let's do something. Let's get somewhere where something makes this feel like we're on to the next level, And so I think maybe once that happens, it would get better, but I don't know. So, well, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know. Let's round up the gang for one last go.
Giddy up.
So we're at the last roundup, and there are plenty of books that kind of deal with the TOS crew after the Undiscovered Country. And one of the things that we do in this book, that Christy Golden does, is discovering the undiscovered, in the sense that we kind of see where these characters are after that movie and what they have been doing before we really dive into the story. And so before we went anywhere else, I just wanted to know what you guys kind of thought about her ideas of what these characters would be up to before we get into the meat of the plot.
Made complete sense to me that some of them, like Spock and Uhura and McCoy, I think, were all working basically on furthering the Khitomer Accords and integrating the Klingon culture into the kind of with the Federation culture, not really integrating them, but teaching each other, I guess, cultural exchanges. And I mean, that's like a direct consequence or direct result of the events in Star Trek VI. And I feel like you can't really have a follow-up to that movie without, referencing that. And to have Spock so integral in that makes total sense, since he was so integral in actually setting up the Khitomer Accords in the first place. So I really enjoyed that. The Uhura and the opera stuff was a little bit weird and quirky, but it was still kind of a fun little, if there's going to be cultural exchanges, I mean, we know how much the Klingons love their opera. So having Uhura involved in that actually made total sense to me.
Yeah, there's some kind of sexual tension between her and this Klingon opera singer. I'm surprised Scotty didn't get jealous and start breaking into Klingon opera to impress her. But I mean, I like that, like everything you were just saying, Casey. I like the whole thing of them working with the Klingons because, yeah, this takes place right after the Undiscovered Country. What I don't like is, well, I shouldn't say I don't like, well, yeah, I guess I don't like it. I don't like these things with Kirk.
Yeah.
It's like I'm so tired of between the 5-year mission and the motion picture, and then before the Wrath of Khan, and now this, we have Kirk pining over the whole idea of, I really wish I were in space. Wish I wasn't having a ground assignment. Wish I wasn't teaching. And you'd think by this point in his career and all the things that he's done, that he can have a ship if he damn well wishes to have one,
Right.
you know, but it's always like, why is Starfleet always trying to remove him from space if he always saves the galaxy? And it sounds like the same rhetoric that he keeps complaining about that he was saying years ago. It's just same old thing over again. And I mean, I'm not blaming the author for that, but it's like we keep putting him in that place. So obviously he has that response.
It's almost like he's Tevye from The Fiddler on the Roof. But instead of singing If I Were a Rich Man, it's If I Were a Captain. Yada, 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 yada. Anyway, sorry about that, folks. Actually, I'm not sorry.
Never
Why did I say that?
apologize for singing.
It was great.
Yeah, we love it.
But it is like that, Bruce. It does feel like that. I think the storyline I have the hardest part with is Kirk. For Kirk to feel like he's not good at anything but being a captain of a starship, like, a lot of what makes him a good captain are things that would be good to have in life, right? And would be good to have on a mission that we're going to get, you know, like that he goes on with his nephews, you know, and all of that kind of, like, it just felt a little bit like we were trying to pigeonhole him and we needed him to feel like this for plot reasons more so than necessarily what I think would be the case. And, you know, I thought, honestly, one of the most fascinating stories here that we don't spend a ton of time on was Chekhov trying to get a captaincy and not being able to get a captaincy because there isn't a ship available that needs a captain, and not necessarily wanting to be a first officer again until at the very end of the book, you know, he becomes Sulu's first officer, which I was like, dude, now that would have been a cool show with, you know, Sulu as captain, Chekhov as first officer. I thought that might be my favorite thing in the book, actually. It was just that one little thing at the very end where Chekhov becomes his first officer, because it made so much sense for that to happen, because they're the youngest of these two, or of this group, you know? And for them to continue on with missions like this makes complete sense.
There's a book or two or something, I can't remember what it is, and maybe you guys know, but it has Captain Sulu with Chekhov as the first officer. And I remember explaining that that Sulu's kind of protecting Chekhov and having him serve as his first officer because Chekhov still had PTSD from the events of the eels in the ear, the bug in the ear from Wrath of Khan, and like it affected his.
It's a long time PTSD. So
PTSD, yeah, it had a long-term effect or something. Like he was still dealing with some trauma from that, and this was like he was still recovering, and that's why he was serving as a first officer. I don't remember what book that was, but I recall a story like that.
Well, it'd be interesting, and I'd love to see the buddy cop show with Chekhov and Sulu.
Yes, yes.
TJ Hooker.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I guess kind of on that with where they all are, I guess one of the main thrust of the plot becomes that, you know, Kirk's nephews are setting up a colony on this planet with these aliens that are actually trying to get into the Federation at the moment. And they've been given this planet they call Sanctuary, and they're going to bring all of these scientists there to kind of create almost like a commune of like-minded scientists working to, you know, better the galaxy. And, you know, Kirk has his nephews talk him into this and somewhat guilt him into it as well. And so just with that is kind of a main storyline too of where we're going to take Kirk. I mean, how did that seem like a good way to kind of get him out of that?
Honestly, like I feel like if they had just either not had him as an instructor at the academy or something, maybe even he was just like bored in retirement, like, but you know, still had to be convinced to go this thing. I think that would have been better because, you know, one of the things I noticed was that he was very against going when his nephew showed up, and they showed up at like midnight to his house to try to convince him to go. I'm like, you're never going to get a yes from somebody at that time. But eventually what actually tipped him over to deciding to go was when that like mentee or advisee or the student of his, Scully, like shows up, that he's just so annoyed by her, and she shows up and he's like, you know what, I think I'll go with my nephews. And I thought that just doesn't seem like Kirk to like decide to go be with family because he can't stand this other person. Like the impression I was left with, that just, it didn't leave a good taste in my mouth. But I think him going and ultimately deciding to go be with his nephews was a good decision. And I feel like it was something Kirk would have done just because he thought maybe there's an adventure there, and seeing all the scientists that were going and everything, and that he could make a difference. That's something Kirk always wants to do, is he can make a difference. And maybe he's not in a captain's chair or anything, and his nephews are the ones in charge. But I feel like Kirk could have seen that, especially if he was going to convince Scotty and Chekhov to go with him anyway, that it might just be a fun adventure for him. They could go camping and singing and toasting marshmallows. I don't know. Like there's lots of reasons he could go.
Yeah.
Yeah, why do they call them marshmallows?
I don't know.
I've never heard anybody calls them marshmallows, but
I don't know. Was it like they couldn't call them mellows maybe because of like rights issues or something? That's
right.
my
I think I did hear something like that once. It has to be. I don't know. Yeah, and then they made a machine that was in stores. You could actually pop your marshmallow in it. But it pops out. Anyway, yeah. I don't. Okay, so here we have Kirk in this situation, and he's teaching, and he's not having the adventure. I just think that, again, at this point in his career, and having done this kind of storyline before of Kirk's got this earthbound job and he needs to be out there having an adventure, it would have been great to have seen something like he's just on vacation for a little while because he's going to be assigned a new starship. Because the Enterprise was retired. I don't recall them saying in the Undiscovered Country that all the officers are retiring, right? They're still working. So he could be waiting for his new ship. It's not going to be ready until September. And he's like, great. Well, I got to sit around here for the next 3 months or 5 months, whatever it is, until my ship's ready. But here's this opportunity for an adventure in the meantime. Instead of having him feeling down and feeling useless, have him excited for that next ride. But before it happens, here's this adventure where he can bond with his nephews.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, I'm remembering the dialogue at the very end where, in the Undiscovered Country, because Kirk says this ship and her crew will soon be the like property of another, and so like the Enterprise wasn't necessarily being retired, but they were retiring. That was because remember, because McCoy's like 3 months from retirement,
Scotty just bought a boat.
Yeah, exactly. Which,
right.
We spend time with Scotty on the boat. Doesn't go as great as he thought it was going to. But I do heartily agree with you, Bruce, because and Casey, I think you both bring up really valid points that it just feels so strange, that Kirk would abandon these students because one of them is kind of annoying. I mean, I feel like Kirk would rise to the challenge to like take the annoyingness out of the student, and just like specifically on that, one of the lessons that he teaches them is that life isn't fair. And I really loved this lesson because I don't think we'd get this lesson anymore, but where he's talking about, to his students about, he's taken them on this really cool expedition to see this planet where a captain had made a Kobayashi Maru type of choice, and trying to get them to see what it means to make these type of command decisions. And some students answer some questions of his, and he gives them extra credit. And he says the rest of you will just have to work a little extra hard on your essays to make them even better. And one of them's like, it's not fair. And he's like, doesn't have to be. I'm the instructor and you're the students. You'll find out that a lot of this universe isn't fair, but it has to be dealt with nonetheless. That too is part of being in Starfleet Officer Dismissed. And it's such a great lesson, for them to learn it. It's like Kirk's actually a good teacher here too, and so that to me, like, I love that he is trying to instill in them this lesson because, yeah, life's going to throw all sorts of things at you that you're not going to expect. I mean, was it fair that Kirk's son died at the hands of a Klingon? Nope. Does it matter? Nope. Does anybody care? Nope. Like, you got to learn to live with life as it comes at you because it's coming at you fast. And that's a part of being in command and making these type of decisions.
Well, and honestly, that's almost what Chekhov is kind of dealing with, like you were saying earlier. Like, he wants to be a captain, like, bad. Mm-hmm. And there's just nothing available. And he's deciding, well, do I want to be a first officer again? Should I just go do something else? And, I'm sure Chekhov is even thinking this isn't fair. Like, I've been in Starfleet forever. And just because there's a ship there's no ship available, I can't be a captain. And, I mean, like you said, this is a lesson that I don't think everybody really gets anymore these days. Like, some people get opportunities, others don't. And, we all have to work extra hard sometimes. And sometimes you're the lucky one. And, and yeah, especially like you said, these, this is the type of instruction I feel like Kirk is made for, teaching these kind of command decision lessons, and especially these hands-on ones for like these students getting to go on a field trip. I'll bet you no other student, at the academy that's not taking whatever class this is that Kirk is teaching is getting to go to this planet or on a cool field trip with like a living legend. That's not fair, and so, I think, he's a little cold in his, response to the students saying it's not fair. But at the same time, this is a lesson that they need to learn early, or else, once they get to these command decisions and they're trying to be fair to everybody under their command, that may not work out well for everybody.
So I'm just wondering, what is the author trying to tell us in this story? That Starfleet isn't fair to Kirk either? Is that what's happening here? And isn't fair to Chekhov?
Honestly, I bet it's what I got from it was setting up the decision at the end of the book. But it
could be, yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's not fair that Kirk Kirk doesn't have a ship either. Chekhov doesn't have a ship. No one's got a ship. Where's Oprah when you need her?
Except for Sulu.
Oh, except for Sulu.
I think what it feels like the story is trying to say is that life is going to continually throw you curveballs and you got to find a way to deal with it. And I think like that seems to be almost the thing that Kirk learns by the end as he is getting ready to go, send off the Enterprise B. And at the very end of the book, he seems almost resolved to the fact of like, I've got to make something out of whatever I've got, and this is the hand I've been dealt. And so what do I do with it? And he could wallow in self-pity, or he could find a way to make something of it. And to me, that's kind of what I got from the end of the book. I don't know. Are you guys on that same wavelength, or what did you think, Bruce? Because that's where I came down.
It is, but at the same time, I think like Casey mentioned earlier, it's, or maybe it was you, Matt, I don't remember, but one of you said about how, towards the end of the book, he's very much like, well, I was useless this whole time, right? Everybody did something and no one needed me. It's like the book ended to me as if saying that Kirk just didn't feel needed. He just doesn't feel like he's of any use anymore. And they're trying to show him, oh, but we wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for the things you used to do. You've inspired us. Now you can go and retire, and because we've all figured out how to do things because you've taught us. I don't know. In a lot of ways you could say, well, it's not fair. That's like his little message to the students. It just is what it is, right? You're just sent curveballs, and sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not.
Well, and it is part of, and I think maybe this is also the lesson Kirk is learning, is that this is part of getting older. If you've done your job, you've trained the next generation to be taking over for you. And you're not needed in the same way that you were before. But that doesn't mean you're not needed. And so I think kind of coming to that realization is difficult for everyone, right? You know, it's like, I was just talking to a friend the other day about, you know, football players that I kind of wish had retired before they did, you know, and it's like they still want to play. They can still play okay, but it probably would have been better for them to retire and just let it go, but they can't let it go. And Kirk is having that, I think, struggle of like letting part of his life go and looking towards the next part, you know? And so to me, I think that's kind of where the book is going. Now, I will say this, I don't think that it's necessarily done well. So you get to the end of the book and you're like, I really like what that was saying the whole time and how it all connected together. This is not one of those books where I feel like all the thematic elements are working really well together.
See, the only problem I have with the whole football player thing is that you want a football player to retire earlier than they did because their game isn't as good as it used to be. They've gotten older and they can't play as well, and maybe they should have left a little earlier than what they did. So, but I never get the feeling that at this point in Kirk's career, he's just not as good as he used to be. You know, I think he still has it in him. I think he could command a starship for at least another 20 years.
Well, I mean, he absolutely could. Yeah.
Well, and when it came down to that tough decision where they were likening it to this decision of this other captain from the Life Isn't Fair lesson, he actually, instead of destroying the colony, chooses not to. I mean, so that was his command. Like that was his command decision, his experience, and even his knowledge of this prior lesson that they learned, kind of all coming to fruition there. And really, if somebody else had gotten that same lesson from the captain on that other planet, they might have just hit that button, self-destructed this whole colony and been done with it. But it, you know, so I understand Kirk feeling kind of aimless and seeing like, well, this person did this and this person did that, and I didn't do anything. Well, you actually did do something. You didn't destroy the colony when everybody thought that was the only choice available. And yeah, like it's that kind of command decision. And I mean, all the captains have to rely on their crew. And granted, he's not like captain of this colony or anything like that, but he has to rely on other people to do stuff. And maybe he as the captain has ideas, but maybe they're not the right ideas and somebody else has a better idea that's executed properly. But having that organization and leadership there is what he can bring to it. And I think on the colony, since his nephews were the ones who were in charge of it, and it totally grated at him that he couldn't, you know, he had to keep his mouth shut when they were negotiating or whatever. I mean, I feel like that's what it is that he's just longing for a command, and that's why he's feeling useless, is because he's not able to just, you know, give orders out.
One of the things, like coming around to this, like one of the themes in the book is about like making tough choices. And that kind of ties into the lesson that Kirk's trying to teach his students, and when to act and when not to, you know, and we see, you know, how Kirk's nephew kind of comes back at him by saying like, you've broken rules all the time. And, you know, you're bending things and all that kind of stuff all the time. Like you're cheating death, and he's throwing all these things in his face. And what I was picking up is what his nephew wasn't realizing is that every time that Kirk, except for the Kobayashi Maru, every time Kirk in his command is breaking the rules or bending the rules or cheating death, he's doing it for the purpose of saving the universe and or other people. Like it's not just about himself. Whereas what we see is that his nephew has done all this for him and his brother and not taken into account any of the consequences for his actions whatsoever. And so it was really fascinating to me because it's like, yeah, it's about like learning to make tough choices, but it's not about just breaking the rules to get ahead for yourself. Like that's totally different thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the nephews and breaking rules, because Julius is probably one of my least favorite Star Trek characters. He was so annoying to me. Just him going off on his brother Alex, and then he makes this deal that involves the Orions and all that. Like, he just made the wrong decisions. I mean, I liked him better once we figured all that out and he apologized for it. But I was just like, gosh, this guy I didn't like his attitude at the very beginning. And I mean, Kurt thought the student, Ali or whatever her name is, was annoying. I thought Julius was more annoying than she was. But, yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about breaking the rules. I mean, it's, if you rob a bank, that's breaking a rule, but it doesn't mean it's right. They need to understand that, like you said, it's, trying to save lives or doing the right things. You might have to bend the rules to get there, but not break them and without understanding the consequences and what you're getting yourself into, like Julius was.
And did they ever explain why the Orion Syndicate or whatever wanted Kirk there? Because Julius and Alexander are trying to heavily persuade Kirk to volunteer to come, and then he finally does. Mm-hmm. But then they act like, Julius acts like he doesn't want Kirk there at all. And we come to find out that he was just one of the terms of the aliens given them the planet.
Yeah, they want Kirk there because he's the trump card.
Oh, right.
For the Federation. He's know
the hostage.
Yeah, they know that if Kirk is there, hopefully they can keep him from being a problem. They kind of control him from coming up with a way to end things for them. And so, yeah, I mean, it was not I think the ideas behind all of that were interesting, but it felt like it needed some refinement overall plot-wise to bring it further together. Because as we're kind of talking about these elements, some of them are really good and some are interesting or whatever, but it doesn't feel as holistic. We were talking on the 602 Club about the Hawkeye show on Disney Plus, and that's a show where a lot of the different characters and a majority of the different thematic elements are all being experienced from different perspectives, all at the same time and throughout the entire series. So it makes things feel much more cohesive. And this is a place where it's I can tell they're trying to do that, but I don't necessarily feel like it's working in the way that it needs to.
Well, I feel like it was a missed opportunity too with, I didn't actually mind Julius being the little brat that he was. And Alexander was kind of, he was, I mean, it turned out that he was just more unsure of himself, I guess, as a leader. And I feel like, because I would have been really upset had both of these Kirk kids been the golden children, just super smart and successful and everything. And so I liked that, Alexander was trying to do something for the greater good. Julius was trying to do stuff to help Alexander, but was just going to do anything he could to get him there. And I feel like we almost have we could have had an id, ego, super ego situation with Julius representing the id, just wanting to go out and get whatever he wants, however he wants to get it. And then Alexander being the ego, but then Kirk being kind of the super ego that tries to, control the two of them and bring them together to work together and everything, kind of, and bringing his life lessons to them, his leadership skills and everything to show them how to lead this and by example, leading by example too, not by butting in during negotiations or anything like that, but just being the sage advice giver, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And, one of the most interesting parts of the book, I think, was the whole, I was just thinking of it in terms of hate leads to suffering, and how the Huani it's discovered, and it's finally brought to light that they had enslaved the Florians, and how their shame has just kind of led them to live in denial. And that denial has also led the Florians to harbor this hate against them for so many years that has just built up and built up and built up until this point where this plot could literally lead to the death of billions of people and strand an entire galaxy without the opportunity to travel from one place to another by warp. Like, it's hardcore. And I thought this was an interesting part of the story, and I felt like this is another place where I just wanted just a little bit more refinement. Because I love when Kirk tells Scully, he's like, you can't heal what you don't acknowledge. And there's some really deep stuff here, and I think this should have been almost like the crux of the issue in the book, and it's not, and that's frustrating. But I do think there's some really good stuff here about, we can't sweep our history under the rug. We got to know what it is, and we got to be able to deal with it, and we got to acknowledge it so that we can deal with it together and then find a way forward. So it's not just about wallowing in the past. It's about finding a way forward.
Yeah, this is my favorite part of the book. It really hits home to some things that I've heard recently today in society and the news, and also things in the past. And, we have a situation where mistakes are made in the past, and we ourselves may not have made those mistakes. It was our ancestors. But we shouldn't have to take the burden of, oh, well, that was something my ancestor did, so let's just sweep it under the rug and just pretend it didn't happen and move on. And that sounds great and wonderful, but from the other side, it's like, you can't not acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge that it happened so that we can heal and understand that you do regret it. And don't be ashamed to say anything about it. And that's what, the Huani, they were ashamed to say anything about it. And no, you should say about it and say, hey, yeah, we apologize for what our ancestors did. It's not us, but we understand. We know what was done wrong. We're not going to repeat that. We know that you have pain and you're unsure of how you think we're going to treat you and such because of things in the past, but we want to assure you that we acknowledge what happened. We point to what happened, but we're not going to be that. We're not that anymore. And so we understand. And that's what it eventually got to. But I really enjoyed that part of the story.
Yeah, it was probably my favorite part of the story as well. And yeah, I mean, like you both have said, if we don't acknowledge the past, we really can't learn from it, and we can't move past it. And it's more than just apologizing too, because Scully even apologizes, just for her own, I think, her own mind, I guess, and even I can't remember the guy's name, Lasan or something like that. He's like, what, you think it's all better now because you said sorry? And she's like, no, but I figured I needed to say it and you needed to hear it from me. And even he, like the Fallorian, kind of has a moment of, he kind of holds back for a second. Like he is affected by this. And I mean, that's what needed to happen to at least get some sort of discussion started between them, because there was a lot of pain. And no, it's not just going to take oh, we're sorry, welcome home, like it's not that simple, but like it's a start, and I wish they had taken more time with it, because especially when he's talking to the Federation president and he's like, oh, you guys don't know about these racial issues. And then a couple of the admirals are in there like, yes, we do. And it was kind of, the bonk bonk on the head message moment, like, oh, we had racism on Earth and we don't anymore. And we've moved past it and you can too. And this PSA has been brought to you by G.I. Joe or whatever. Like, and it was just a little, it wasn't a little heavy-handed. It was a lot heavy-handed. And it was just because they needed to, I think, to move the story along. But it's like, this could have been a longer, a longer discussion, a longer plot point. It was an important plot point that was the underlying issue for the entire story, like why the Fallorians want to do what they want to do. Right. And it was just kind of glossed over a little bit, and I wish that the author would have spent a little bit more time with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I mean, Yeah, it is interesting because, you do see, and obviously the two admirals there, they have no experience with this whatsoever. They just know well the history, right? And so they are able to speak into that and say, hey, yeah, our people specifically had those issues hundreds of years ago on our planet. But we didn't sweep it under the rug and we dealt with it, right? And that's what has allowed us to be where we are today. And so, like you said, it's a great moment, but it does feel like it is just a way to like kind of get the story moving instead of being able to dive a little bit deeper into the subject, which, again, is a little bit disappointing. So, but yeah, I think it sounds like for all of us, this is really was the most interesting and best part of the book so far. So I do want to ask you, there's a couple other things that I just was interested in, and how did you feel about this whole day and a year thing? Because, yeah, I'm just go, because I don't know. Feels weird.
Yeah, the entire time that kept coming up, it felt like before it really connected in the story, which it never really connected in the story very much, but like once Spock got involved with this Klingon ship, it just seemed like a way to shoehorn, like, basically get Spock and who is it? Spock, Uhura, and McCoy to this planet so we could actually have our crew comes together at the end, like it just didn't seem like it seemed out of character, I guess, for the Chancellor Zetberg to do this. Because otherwise, why would we have not heard about this during Star Trek VI? Since like Kirk saved her life, and all this stuff. Like, I don't know. It just seemed a bit contrived.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me that we hadn't heard it before or didn't get it in Star Trek VI. But it did seem a bit of a stretch to try to get Kirk involved. And yeah, I'm still a little confused because he didn't accept it, but yet he kind of does it through Spock or something. I don't know. I'm confused now too.
And I think both of you have just rightly pointed out, and what you kind of come away with is this plot point. We need this plot point because we need these characters to be a part of this later on, and plot point, and so it doesn't feel as organic as you would want it to really be able to flow with the rest of the story. It does kind of feel like something almost outside of the rest of the story, and it shouldn't feel like that because it does become an important piece of why these characters end up in that place in the end. So, yeah, it's just not as clean as it could have been. Which
I don't really think we really needed the Klingons now that we're talking about this.
Well, I mean, yeah, they only come in because they're connecting Spock and like give them it gives Standing Crane a way to enact help to Kirk without getting the Federation involved.
Which didn't make sense since they had a Federation colony on this planet. They were Federation citizens. So the fact that she turned Spock down from sending a Starfleet ship there in the first place actually seemed kind of counter to what Starfleet would have done anyway. Yeah. When they say somewhere in their book, there's like tens of thousands of ships out there. You tell me they can't spare one to go to Sanctuary just to double check. And, there's got to be one in the quadrant somewhere.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. So, well, I mean, is they're saving the universe one more time? I guess, as the last hurrah, the last roundup. What did you guys think of it overall then as their kind of final mission together? Because, right after this, the book ends with Kirk putting on his uniform to go to the Enterprise B.
I got flashes of Michael Burnham and the Burn from Star Trek Discovery Season 3 throughout this book. Yes, the whole
Maybe that's where they stole it from. Who knows?
With the whole like their dilithium's going to be destroyed, which is what happened in the burn. And actually, I almost would have rather seen something like this happen in Discovery. But the way they end up saving the universe again was I actually kind of like the end of the book for me kind of picked up, and it went incredibly fast. Like they spent very little time like getting through. They basically put up a shield, and now the communications are down. They can't activate these nanoprobes and everything. But in the end, we knew that they had to destroy the nanoprobes, and I guess I'm just glad that they didn't leave any of the nanoprobes still sitting out there somewhere to potentially be picked up somewhere else. But I liked how they all worked together. I liked that Kirk, had the wherewithal to not destroy the entire colony, and when it came time to make that decision. And honestly, like the progression of his feelings toward Scully, his interactions with her towards the end of the book were a lot better. He still had some of those reservations, like, oh, he almost said no, but then thought better of it because she's been so helpful. I think by that point, like, he would have been just doing whatever she wanted, and but I don't know. I guess at the end of it, it was ended very cleanly. I was, happy with the end. It was a kind of a fun little adventure at the very end there, and it was good to see everybody, and seeing, like you said before, Matthew, about Chekhov going to be Sulu's first officer, and yes, that's the story I want to see next.
I liked it. I liked it better towards the end. It got better as it went along, I think. And because they found a way to save the universe. And there's things that are similar here with the dilithium that's like we see in Star Trek Discovery, which is funny to me because there's a statement said later like, gosh, can you imagine if this were to happen? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, in several centuries, it will. Something very similar to this. And the fact that this is their last hurrah, their last mission as a group, did it satisfy me as being their last? Not really. I like their last being the Undiscovered Country better than this being the last thing that they did together, because it wasn't all that to me. Because if you're going to do the last hurrah, I'd rather them all be there together from pretty much the beginning instead of waiting to the end. But I do like Kirk's decisions of, we have to, it's not about just stopping this from happening, but potentially, stopping any potential of it happening in the future. Somebody getting the technology, so the nanoprobes have to be destroyed. And so we couldn't just destroy the station or the machinery that controls this. We have to get everything destroyed and convince these two societies to form their rectify any issues they've had with each other, so we can get the codes to stop it. And it seems very Kirk-like when Spock comes in and saves them at the last minute, all those things feel very Star Trek. So, I like how it ended, but not necessarily as this is their last roundup.
Yeah, I honestly can't add anything to that. I think you said it exactly how I was feeling, Bruce. So that it leaves me with only one question is, what would you rate the last roundup?
I was really struggling because Goodreads only allows you to do whole stars. And I didn't feel this necessarily was a 2-star book for me, but I was kind of in the 2.5 range. The nuts and bolts, the meat and potatoes of this story are good. I feel like that the execution wasn't great for me. So I actually rounded up to a 3-star just because I don't feel like it's bad enough, I suppose, to be a 2-star. So I gave it 3 out of 5 atmospheric shuttles that can't go up into space.
I'm with you on this. I was enjoying it as I was reading it, but then when I got to the end and we're discussing it, I just realized there's just some things that bother me a little. It's just not quite there. I don't like how Kirk was handled at the beginning of the book, and his nephews were kind of driving me crazy, but as it went on, it got better for me, but it just, it just feels like it's not quite there yet. Like it needs a little more work to me to really work better. But it wasn't that I didn't enjoy it, and I read it pretty much in 2 days. So it wasn't like I was struggling getting through it. It was flowing, it was going well. But, anytime you take any of our crew members off of a ship and you don't have them on the Enterprise, it doesn't usually work as well as when they all are serving together on the Enterprise. So outside of all that, I would just say that, interesting story, interesting concept to try to play with, but didn't always work for me. So I'd give it 3 Starfleet ships that are within range of the planet.
Nice. I mean, I'm right there with you guys. I would probably say this is like, if I was being really technical, it's like probably 2.5, 2.75. Because it's not a 3 really, but on Goodreads it's a 3. And for everything that you mentioned, and I think really it just doesn't all coalesce into one cohesive thematic work the way you would want it to. And Bruce, I think you kind of nailed this when you're doing this kind of story. If it's going to be a last hurrah for this entire crew doing a story, it has to feel better than the Undiscovered Country, and this doesn't. So I'm right there with you guys in this. So
if I was going to do a last hurrah, I would have it more of as a real sequel to the Undiscovered Country. Mm-hmm. What happens with the Klingons after this? And it's all about the relationship between the Federation, the Klingons, and how this crew steps in to bring them together from those events.
Well, as we hit the last hurrah with this episode, guys, this was so much fun, and we've got some great stuff ahead of us, as we talked about. We've got some brand new books coming out, and of course, we're going to be continuing, and actually, Bruce, I think really finishing the big last major piece of us talking. We're going to be doing brinksmanship coming up, and then we're going to be starting some fun different series as well. We're going to do New Earth as well as Left Hand of Destiny and some other things like that. So, we're going to work in some Enterprise books as well. So, guys, stay tuned. Literary Treks has a bunch coming at you this year. But, goodness, Casey, love that you're here on Literary Treks these days. And so where can people catch up with you when you're not here, or, at least trying to beg off a place to sleep in the green room with Dayton?
Well, yeah, he made some room for me on the couch, so it's been good. Nice. Yes. You can find me pretty much anywhere at Knitting Trekkie. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, Letterboxd. I don't post very much on Twitter anymore or Instagram, but very active on Letterboxd and Goodreads. I try to be anyway. I'm also in the Babel conference from time to time, making comments on things. And then I'm also on another podcast called Mickey's Marvels that I do with my friends Chris and Pat, where we talk about everything under the Disney umbrella.
And Bruce, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. That's Admiral with the underline Rex. And you can also find me on Goodreads. I'm also out there on Facebook. I'm in the Babel conference. I may not be posting, but I'm reading. I'm there. You can find me in there somewhere if you just reach out. And you can find me on the Positively Trek podcast with Dan Gunther. And we talk about Star Trek stuff. And, usually in a positive manner, unlike what I was doing on this show today. But, we can still criticize things and still be positive. And then I'm also occasionally on the Star Wars Report podcast.
Well, I do have to say, I think that's one of the beautiful things about, this show. We might not always be positive about something, but we are going to try and be positive in our criticism about why that's the case. And so we're never here to just tear things down, which I think makes for great conversation together. And of course, you could find me all over the place under the name Matt Rushing02, Letterboxd, Twitter, Vero, Instagram, all that stuff. I'm also on Goodreads, as is the entire show. You can find our community over there for the Literary Treks group on Goodreads. And you course, find me here on the network and that whole other side of the network where we don't talk Star Trek. We talk about all the other fandoms we love in the 602 Club. And of course, we've got the bonus shows going on, like Snyder Cuts and Assembling Avengers. You can also find me talking a lot more Star Trek with The Orb as well as Warp 5. The Orb, where Chris and I are talking Deep Space Nine, and Warp 5, where we're walking through every single episode of Enterprise to celebrate the fact that it turned 20 years old last year. So, very fun. And you can also find me over on the Nerd Party Network doing a couple of shows. One is a finished show I did with Drea Kaufman. We talked about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time, on Owl Post. And the one and only John Mills and I talk about Star Wars on Aggressive Negotiations. But thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, live long
and read on.
What do you call that, light reading? To each his own, number one.